The message arrived at exactly 0347 Galactic Standard Time, cutting through the void of space like a scream in the darkness. This is Admiral Zextar of the Collective Fleet. We are under attack. Our defenses have failed. Our worlds are burning. The Devourers have come and we cannot stop them. The transmission crackled with interference, punctuated by the distant sound of explosions and dying screams. To any who received this message, we were wrong. We were so terribly wrong about the humans. They are not the weak species we believed them to be. They are something else entirely, something we never should have awakened. Static filled the void for several heartbeats before the Admiral's voice returned, barely a whisper now. We called for help 3 cycles ago, when the first human ships appeared in our territory. We laughed at their crude vessels and primitive weapons. We sent our grand armadas to sweep them away like dust. But they adapted. They learned. They became something we had never seen before. Another explosion, closer this time. The sound of rending metal echoed through the transmission. The humans are coming. Not to save us, to finish what we started. And by the void, we deserve every moment of what's about to happen. This is our final warning to the galaxy. Never, ever underestimate the humans. The transmission cut to static, then silence. In the depths of space, automated relay stations caught the message and broadcast it across 1,000 star systems. Within hours, every major civilization in the galaxy would hear Admiral Zextar's final words. But by then, it would already be too late. Chapter 1. The Wrong Enemy. 3 cycles earlier. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES, Defiance, watching the stars streak past the viewport as her ship dropped out of hyperspace. The familiar blue-white glow of the jump drive faded, replaced by the cold light of an alien sun. "Navigation report," she commanded, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. Lieutenant Commander Yuki Tanaka looked up from her console, her dark eyes reflecting the glow of multiple displays. "We're at the edge of the Vegalon system, Captain, right where the distress signal originated." Sarah nodded grimly. The message had been brief but urgent, a plea for help from the Collective, the galaxy's self-proclaimed peacekeeping force. Strange, considering the Collective had spent the last 50 years treating humanity like a backwater nuisance. "Any signs of the fleet that sent the distress call?" Sarah asked. Her tactical officer, Commander Marcus Rodriguez, shook his head. His weathered face bore the scars of too many battles. "Negative, Captain. I'm reading debris fields in 3 sectors, but no active ships. Whatever happened here, it's over." Sarah frowned. The Collective's 3rd fleet had been massive, over 200 ships. To find nothing but wreckage. "Captain," called out Dr. Elena Vasquez from the science station, her voice tight with concern. "I'm detecting massive energy readings from the 4th planet. The signatures are unusual." "Unusual how?" "They're not matching any known technology in our databases. The energy patterns are completely alien, more so than anything we've encountered from the Collective or any other species." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. In her 15 years of service, she'd seen her share of mysteries, but something about this felt different. "Dangerous. Set course for the 4th planet, but keep us at long range. I want to know what we're dealing with before we commit." As the Defiance moved through the debris field, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The twisted remains of Collective warships drifted past their viewports, mighty dreadnoughts torn apart like paper. Their hull plating melted and warped in ways that defied explanation. "Jesus," whispered Rodriguez. "What could do this to a Collective fleet?" Before anyone could answer, the ship's communication array crackled to life. A new voice filled the bridge, smooth, melodious, and utterly inhuman. "Greetings, humans. We have been waiting for you." Sarah exchanged glances with her senior staff. "This is Captain Chen of the United Earthship Defiance. Identify yourself." "We are the Shadaki. We are the ones who answered the Collective's call for aid, and we are the ones who will now answer yours." The temperature on the bridge seemed to drop several degrees. Sarah's hand moved instinctively to her sidearm, though she knew it would be useless against whatever was out there. "We didn't call for aid," she replied carefully. We received a distress signal and came to investigate. Did you not? The voice carried an undertone of amusement that made Sarah's skin crawl. How interesting. Tell us, Captain Chen, what do you know of your species' true nature? I'm not sure what you mean. Of course you don't. The collective made the same mistake. They judged you by your technology, your numbers, your apparent limitations. They never looked deeper. They never asked the right questions. Sarah felt her crew tensing around her. Whatever was happening here, it was moving beyond first contact protocols into something far more sinister. What questions should they have asked? She found herself saying. Why do you fight so hard? Why do you never surrender? Why, when faced with impossible odds, do you somehow find a way to win? The voice paused, and Sarah could swear she heard something like satisfaction in its tone. The collective learned the answers to those questions, Captain. Just before we consumed them, the bridge fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Sarah's mind raced, trying to process what she'd just heard. You consumed them? Every ship, every crew, every trace of their existence, and we learned such fascinating things from their memories. About you, Captain Chen, about your species, about the wars you've fought and the enemies you've overcome. The main view screen flickered to life, showing the fourth planet in the system. But instead of a normal world, they saw something that defied comprehension. A writhing mass of organic tissue and metallic structures, pulsing with an alien light. Beautiful, isn't it? The Shadaki continued. This is what remains of the collective's third fleet. They have become part of us, their knowledge merged with ours, and soon you will join them. Sarah's training kicked in. All hands, battle stations. Helm, bring us about. We're leaving. Now. I'm afraid that won't be possible, Captain. The Defiance shuddered as invisible forces seized the ship. Alarms began, blaring as the hull groaned under immense pressure. You see, the voice continued, we have learned much about humanity from the collective's memories. Your capacity for violence, your refusal to accept defeat, your tendency to become more dangerous when threatened. The ship lurched violently, throwing several crew members to the deck. We find these traits intriguing. The collective was certain they could defeat you easily. They prepared for war with beings they considered primitive. They had no idea what they were actually facing. Sarah grabbed the nearest railing as the ship continued to shake. What are you talking about? When cornered, humans don't just fight back, Captain. You transform. You become something else entirely, something the collective was never prepared for. The main screen flickered again, showing scenes of battle, human ships, but not like any Sarah had ever seen. These vessels were sleek, deadly, and moved with a predatory grace that sent shivers down her spine. Where did you get these images? She demanded. From the future, Captain Chen. From the timeline where the collective's war with humanity has already begun, where your species has already shown its true face. The Defiance gave another violent lurch, and Sarah realized with growing horror that they were being pulled toward the planet thing below. You're going to find this fascinating, the Shadaki said. We're going to extract every memory from your crew, every piece of tactical knowledge, every strategic insight, and then we're going to use that information to prepare for humanity's arrival. Our arrival? Sarah gasped, fighting against the increasing gravitational pull. Oh yes. The collective's first attack on your colonies happens in exactly 72 hours. They're already en route, their fleets confident in their superiority. They have no idea that in trying to destroy you, they're about to unleash something that will reshape the galaxy itself. The voice took on an almost gleeful tone. They called for help when they realized what they'd done. But we didn't come to save them, Captain. We came to prepare for the storm that's coming, and that storm is you. Chapter 2. The Awakening. 70 hours later. The first attack came without warning. Colonel David Park was reviewing morning reports in his office on New Tokyo when the planet's orbital defense grid lit up like a Christmas tree. Alarms blared throughout the colony as massive shapes dropped out of hyperspace. Collective dreadnoughts, their hulls gleaming with predatory intent. "Sir," his aide burst through the door. "We're under attack. The collective fleet is broadcasting an ultimatum: surrender or face annihilation." David was already reaching for his uniform jacket. "How many ships?" 237 confirmed contacts, sir. They're moving into bombardment positions." David felt his blood turn to ice. New Tokyo was one of humanity's newest colonies, barely defended and home to 3 million civilians. The entire colonial defense force consisted of 6 outdated frigates and a handful of orbital platforms. It was slaughter waiting to happen. "Get me a channel to the fleet commander," he ordered, knowing it was probably futile but having to try. The main display in his office flickered to life, showing the bridge of a collective command ship. The creature that appeared was tall, insectoid with 4 arms and multifaceted eyes that glittered with cold intelligence. "I am Admiral Zextar of the Collective Third Fleet," it announced in accented English. "You will surrender immediately and submit to processing. Resist and we will glass your world." David straightened, calling upon years of military training to keep his voice steady. "This is Colonel Park of the New Tokyo Defense Force. This is an unprovoked attack on a civilian colony. I demand to know." "You demand nothing, human," Zextar interrupted. "Your species has been judged a threat to galactic peace. You will be eliminated." The transmission cut off, and David was left staring at a blank screen. 3 million people. Families, children, elderly couples who'd come here to start new lives on the frontier. And he had 6 ships to protect them. "Sir," his aide said quietly. "Orders?" David closed his eyes for a moment, thinking of his own family back on Earth. Then he opened them, and his expression had hardened into something that would have given Admiral Zextar pause, had he seen it. "Signal all defense platforms and ships, we fight." "Sir, against that fleet. We fight," David repeated, his voice carrying a note of absolute finality. "And we make them pay for every inch." What Admiral Zextar didn't understand, what none of the collective understood, was that humanity had been preparing for this moment for 50 years. Not consciously, perhaps, but in the way that shaped their culture, their technology, their very souls. Ever since first contact with the galactic community, humans had been dismissed as primitives. Their ships were slower, their weapons less advanced, their numbers insignificant. But dismissal had bred something in humanity that the galaxy had never seen before. Rage. Pure, focused, evolutionary rage. As the first collective bombardment began, something awakened in the human defenders that had been dormant since the species had crawled out of caves and decided to fight tigers with pointed sticks. The 6 frigates didn't attempt to match the collective ship's firepower. Instead, they did something no galactic species had ever done. They coordinated with a precision that bordered on telepathic, moving like a single organism with a dozen deadly appendages. Frigate Captain Maria Santos watched her tactical display and felt time slow around her. She could see the collective attack pattern, could predict their moves 3 steps ahead. It was as if someone had flipped a switch in her brain, turning her from a competent officer into something else entirely. "All ships execute pattern Omega," she commanded, her voice eerily calm. The 6 frigates moved as one, diving into the heart of the collective formation. Their weapons, primitive by galactic standards, found weak points in enemy shields. With surgical precision. More importantly, they began broadcasting something that would change the course of the war. Information. Every human ship was equipped with quantum communicators that could transmit data instantaneously across any distance. As the frigates fought and died, they analyzed every aspect of collective technology, tactics, and behavior. That data flowed back to Earth in real time, where it was processed by the most dangerous weapon humanity possessed: human intuition. Within hours, Earth's military commanders had identified 17 critical vulnerabilities in collective fleet doctrine. Within days, those vulnerabilities would be exploited across a dozen star systems. But Admiral Zextar knew none of this as he watched the human frigates die. To him, it looked like exactly what he'd expected: primitive ships throwing themselves, uselessly against superior firepower. "Begin planetary bombardment," he ordered. "Make an example of them." The first energy beams lanced down from orbit, carving molten scars across New Tokyo's surface. Civilian evacuation centers became funeral pyres. Residential districts vanished in flashes of superheated plasma. 3 million human voices cried out in pain and terror, and across the galaxy, something answered. On Earth, Admiral Rebecca Torres felt it first, a cold fury that seemed to rise from the depths of her soul. Around her, the command staff of Fleet Headquarters went rigid as the same feeling swept through them. "Ma'am," her aide whispered, "the reports from New Tokyo—" "I know," Torres replied, her voice deadly quiet. "Signal all fleet commands. Authorization, Omega 77. Full deployment." "Ma'am, that's every ship, every crew, every weapon we have." Torres turned to face her staff, and they saw something in her eyes that made them step back. "They want to see what humans are capable of? Let's show them." Within 6 hours, the largest military mobilization in human history was underway. Ships that had been in mothballs for decades were suddenly swarming with crews. Weapons that existed only in classified files were being loaded onto vessels. Most importantly, something was happening to the crews themselves. The rage was spreading, passed from person to person like a virus. But it wasn't mindless fury. It was something far more dangerous. It was evolutionary pressure compressed into conscious will. Humanity was adapting. On New Tokyo, Colonel Park watched from his bunker as his world burned. But he wasn't thinking about defeat. He was thinking about Admiral Zextar's multifaceted eyes and exactly how he was going to put them out. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "I'm getting a transmission from Earth Fleet Command." The voice that came through was Admiral Torres, but there was something different about it. Something that made Park's spine straighten and his hands clench into fists. "Colonel Park, this is Admiral Torres. Help is coming. Hold your position and prepare to upload all tactical data. We're going to make sure the collective remembers this day for the rest of their very short existence." Park smiled for the first time since the attack began. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Understood, Admiral. We'll keep the lights on for you." Above the planet, Admiral Zextar was beginning to realize that something was wrong. The human defenders weren't breaking. They weren't surrendering. Instead, they were fighting with a ferocity that defied logic. Worse, they were learning. Each attack wave faced stiffer resistance than the last. The humans were adapting their tactics in real time, finding weaknesses in collective doctrine that shouldn't have been apparent to such a primitive species. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "we're receiving strange transmissions from the human forces. They appear to be—" "What?" "Singing, sir. They're singing as they die." Zextar's 4 eyes narrowed. In the collective, dying was silent, orderly, efficiently processed. But these humans— He switched to monitor the human communications and immediately wished he hadn't. The voices came through clearly, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all joining in a single haunting melody that spoke of defiance and sacrifice and something else. "Hope." "What are they singing?" he demanded. His translation systems struggled with the archaic human language, but eventually provided an answer. "It appears to be something called the Battle Hymn of the Republic, sir, a song about righteous warfare and divine justice." Zextar felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries: fear, not of the human weapons or ships, but of what the singing represented. These beings weren't just fighting for their lives. They were fighting for something they believed in, and they were doing it with a joy that transcended death itself. For the first time, Admiral Zextar began to wonder if the collective had made a terrible mistake. Admiral Rebecca Torres stood in the command center of the UES Vengeance, humanity's newest and most powerful warship. Around her, dozens of displays showed the deployment of what military historians would later call the first human war fleet. It was magnificent and terrible to behold. Over 3,000 ships moved in perfect formation through hyperspace, their destinations scattered across 17 star systems. Each vessel carried weapons that had never been tested in combat, crewed by men and women who had undergone a transformation that defied scientific explanation. They called it the Awakening. Dr. Amanda Foster, Earth's leading xenopsychologist, had tried to document the phenomenon but found herself struggling to put it into words. "It's as if we're remembering something we forgot," she'd told Torres during a briefing. "Some aspect of human nature that we buried under civilization and diplomacy." Torres understood what she meant. She could feel it in herself. A clarity of purpose that cut through doubt and hesitation like a blade. Every decision seemed obvious now, every tactical choice inevitable. They were becoming what they needed to be. "Admiral," her tactical officer reported, "we're receiving an update from the Kepler system. Captain Williams reports complete success. The collective garrison has been neutralized." Torres nodded without looking away from her displays. The reports had been coming in steadily for 3 days, human forces striking at collective outposts with surgical precision, but leaving behind something that made even Torres uneasy. No survivors. Ever. "What about their fleet strength?" she asked. "Collective Command appears to be consolidating their remaining forces at Vega Prime. Intelligence estimates 800 ships, including their flagship. 800 ships. 3 months ago, that number would have represented impossible odds. Now it just felt like target practice. "Signal the fleet," Torres commanded. "All units converge on Vega Prime. It's time to finish this." But even as she gave the order, Torres felt a nagging worry in the back of her mind. The transformation happening to humanity was powerful, but it was also consuming. Each victory seemed to demand more from them, pushing them further from what they had been. The question was, would there be anything recognizably human left when the war was over? Vega Prime System. Admiral Zextar paced the bridge of his flagship, all 4 of his arms clasped behind his back. The past 2 weeks had been a nightmare of constant retreats and crushing defeats. 17 collective outposts had been destroyed, along with over 400 ships. But it wasn't the losses that kept him awake. It was the way the humans fought. "Show me the tactical recordings from Kepler Station again," he ordered. The main display lit up with footage from the battle. Zextar watched in horrified fascination as human ships moved through the collective formation like predators among prey. They didn't just destroy enemy vessels. They hunted them down with methodical precision, ensuring that nothing escaped. Computer, analyze human tactical patterns and compare to previous engagements. Analysis complete. Human forces show 347% improvement in combat effectiveness over baseline projections. Adaptation rate is unprecedented. 347%. In 2 weeks, these supposedly primitive beings had improved their fighting capability by over 3 times. It defied every principle of military science Zextar knew. "Admiral," his communications officer announced, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. They're demanding our surrender." Zextar felt his mandibles click with bitter amusement. "Put it through." The face that appeared on his screen made him step back involuntarily. It was human, female, with graying hair and calm eyes. But there was something in those eyes that spoke of depths he didn't want to explore. "I am Admiral Rebecca Torres of the United Earth Navy," she said simply. "You have 1 hour to surrender your forces unconditionally. If you refuse, we will destroy every ship in your fleet." "You're outnumbered 8-1, Zextar replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Torres smiled, and Zextar felt his chitin crawl. "Admiral, numbers stopped mattering the moment you attacked New Tokyo. What matters now is justice." The transmission ended, leaving Zextar staring at a blank screen. Justice, not victory, not conquest, justice. As if the humans saw themselves as instruments of some cosmic balancing force. "All ships, battle formation Omega," he commanded. "We'll show these primitives what the collective is capable of." But even as he gave the orders, Zextar couldn't shake the feeling that he was commanding his fleet to its doom. The Battle of Vega Prime lasted exactly 17 minutes. Later analysis would show that the collective fleet held every tactical advantage: superior numbers, better weapons, defensive positioning. By every rule of warfare, they should have won easily. Instead, they were annihilated. The human fleet moved like a single organism, each ship perfectly positioned to support its neighbors while maintaining devastating firepower on target. But it was more than tactics. The humans fought with a synchronization that bordered on telepathic. Captain James Mitchell commanded the lead squadron, and as his ship dove into the heart of the collective formation, he felt something he'd never experienced before. It was as if he could sense the thoughts and intentions of every other human in the fleet. No, more than that. He could feel their emotions, their anger at New Tokyo, their determination to end the threat, their absolute conviction that they were fighting for something greater than themselves. All ships, execute pattern Alpha 7, he heard himself saying. Though he couldn't remember forming the thought consciously, the response was immediate and perfect. 60 ships moved in flawless coordination, their weapons finding weak points in collective shields with impossible accuracy. Enemy vessels that had seemed invulnerable moments before began exploding in chains of fire. On the collective flagship, Admiral Zextar watched his fleet disintegrate with growing horror. "How?" he whispered. "How are they doing this?" His tactical officer's voice shook as he replied, "Admiral, I'm reading massive quantum entanglement signatures from the human ships. Their crews appear to be linked somehow." Linked. Zextar felt the full implications of that word sink in. These weren't individual ships fighting independently. They were components of a single vast organism, a predator that had evolved, specifically to hunt and kill. "Signal all ships," he commanded. "Full retreat. Emergency hyperspace jump." "Sir, the jump coordinates, anywhere but here." But it was too late. The human fleet had anticipated the retreat, positioning themselves to block every escape route. One by one, collective ships died as they tried desperately to flee. Admiral Zextar found himself alone on his bridge, his crew dead or fled, his ship's systems failing around him. Through the viewport, he could see human vessels moving in for the kill, their hulls gleaming with predatory satisfaction. A new transmission came through and Admiral Torres' face appeared on his screen once more. "Admiral Zextar," she said quietly, "before you die, I want you to understand something. This isn't about conquest. This isn't about territory or resources or even revenge." Zextar found his voice. "Then what is it about?" "Evolution," Torres replied. "Your attack on New Tokyo didn't just kill 3 million humans. It woke something up. Something that's been sleeping in our species for millennia." The flagship shuddered as human weapons found their target. "What? What have you become?" Zextar whispered. Torres's expression softened slightly, but the steel never left her eyes. "What we always were, Admiral. What every predator becomes when its young are threatened." The transmission cut off, and moments later, the collective flagship exploded in a pillar of fire that could be seen from 3 light-years away. The war was over. But as Admiral Torres watched the debris drift through space, she felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold vacuum around them. The transformation that had made their victory possible was still happening, still changing them, and she was beginning to wonder if they would ever be able to stop it. Chapter 4. The Price of Awakening. 1 month after Vega Prime. Dr. Elena. Vasquez sat in her laboratory aboard the UES Prometheus, staring at test results that should have been impossible. Around her, dozens of screens displayed data that challenged everything she thought she knew about human biology. "Computer, run the analysis again," she commanded, though she'd already verified the results 17 times. Analysis complete. Genetic modifications in human combat personnel show 97.3% penetration across all tested subjects. Modifications appear to be self-propagating and heritable. Elena rubbed her tired eyes. 3 weeks of research had led to one inescapable conclusion. Humanity was no longer entirely human. The changes had started subtly. Enhanced reflexes, improved spatial awareness, an uncanny ability to predict enemy movements. Military commanders had attributed it to training and experience, but Elena knew better. She'd been studying samples from combat veterans, and what she found terrified her. Their DNA was rewriting itself. "Dr. Vasquez," came a voice from behind her. She turned to see Admiral Torres entering the lab, flanked by 2 security officers. "Admiral," Elena said, standing. "I wasn't expecting you." "I need to see your report," Torres said without preamble. "The real one, not the sanitized version you submitted to command." Elena hesitated. The full report was classified at the highest levels, containing information that could cause panic across human space. "Doctor," Torres interrupted, and Elena saw something in her eyes that made her blood run cold. "I'm not asking." Elena pulled up the classified files, her hands trembling slightly. "The genetic modifications appear to be triggered by extreme stress and combat situations. The changes are being passed from person to person through proximity, almost like a virus." She highlighted sections of the data. Enhanced neuroplasticity, increased muscle density, accelerated healing, and something else, something we don't fully understand. What kind of something? Quantum entanglement between neural networks. The combat veterans are developing a form of shared consciousness. They can anticipate each other's actions, coordinate without communication, react to threats they shouldn't be able to perceive. Torres nodded slowly. "The fleet integration we observed at Vega Prime." "Exactly. But Admiral, there's more." Elena's voice dropped to a whisper. "The changes aren't stopping. They're accelerating, and they're spreading to non-combat personnel." Torres was quiet for a long moment, studying the data. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that seemed to press down on the room. "What's the timeline for full species modification?" "At current rates, 18 months, maybe less." "And the psychological effects?" Elena hesitated again. This was the part that kept her awake at night. "Increased aggression, reduced empathy. For non-humans, enhanced pack bonding within human groups. Admiral, we're becoming something else, something that's optimized for warfare." Torres walked to the viewport, staring out at the stars. "The Shadaki were right," she said quietly. "They knew this would happen. They prepared for it." "The what?" Torres turned back to Elena, and the doctor saw something in her expression that chilled her to the bone. "There are things you don't know, Doctor. Things that happened before the war began. We're not the first species this has happened to." Before Elena could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Torres immediately activated her comm. "Unit, bridge, report. Admiral, we're receiving multiple distress signals from the outer colonies. Something's attacking our ships." Torres and Elena exchanged glances. "The collective is finished," Torres said. "Who else could?" "Admiral," the voice from the bridge continued. "The attacking vessels. They're not in our databases. The energy signatures are completely unknown." Elena felt her stomach drop. "The Shadaki." Torres nodded grimly. "Set course for the nearest distress signal. Maximum warp." As the Prometheus leaped into hyperspace, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that humanity's victory over the collective had been exactly what their enemies wanted all along. The Outer Rim, Colony Ship Esperanza. Captain Maria Santos had been enjoying retirement on the agricultural colony ship when the attack began. Now she found herself back in command, coordinating the defense of 8,000 civilians against an enemy unlike anything in her experience. The attacking vessels were organic in appearance, their hulls rippling with what looked like living tissue. They moved through space with fluid grace, ignoring physics in ways that made her tactical computers scream error messages. "Captain," her makeshift weapons officer reported, "our weapons are having no effect. The enemy shields are adapting to every frequency we throw at them." Maria felt the familiar sensation of combat clarity washing over her, the awakening that had made her generation of officers so devastatingly effective. But this time, it felt different, deeper, more complete. All civilian vessels maintain formation. Military ships prepare for close engagement. "Ma'am, we only have 6 frigates against 20 unknowns." Maria smiled, and her bridge crew felt an involuntary shiver. There was something predatory in that expression, something that spoke of evolutionary changes still in progress. 6 frigates and 8,000 angry humans, she corrected. "Signal all vessels, civilian and military. We're going to show These bastards, what happens when you threaten human families? What followed was unlike any battle in recorded history. The civilian vessels, cargo haulers, transports, even pleasure craft, transformed into improvised weapons platforms. Their crews, most of whom had never seen combat, fought with a coordination and ferocity that defied explanation. The Shadaki ships, which had easily consumed collective fleets, found themselves facing something they hadn't expected. An enemy that adapted faster than they could. Maria felt it happening in real time. The shared consciousness that was becoming humanity's greatest weapon. She could sense the thoughts and intentions of every human in the fleet, their anger and determination flowing through her like fire. But more than that, she could feel something else awakening, something that had been dormant in the human genome for millennia, waiting for the right stimulus to emerge. The ability to weaponize evolution itself. As the battle raged, Maria watched human vessels begin to physically transform. Hull plating shifted and flowed like living metal. Weapons systems reconfigured themselves in real time to counter enemy defenses. Most remarkably, the ships began to reproduce, spawning smaller vessels that moved with the same fluid grace as their Shadaki opponents. "My God," whispered her science officer. "Captain, the ships are alive. They're actually alive." Maria nodded, feeling no surprise. Somehow she'd known this moment was coming. The genetic modifications that had made humans such effective warriors were just the beginning. Evolution had found a new path forward. "Signal Admiral Torres," she commanded. "Tell her we've made contact with the real enemy, and tell her that humanity is ready for the next phase." The Shadaki vessels began to retreat, their organic hulls showing signs of damage that should have been impossible. As they fled, a new transmission reached the human fleet. "Impressive," came a voice that seemed to resonate from multiple sources at once. "The collective was right to fear you. But you are still young, still learning. We have been doing this for millions of years." "Who are you?" Maria demanded. "We are the Shadaki. We are the gardeners of evolution, the shepherds of species, transformation. We plant the seeds of change and harvest the results." The transmission paused, and Maria could swear she heard something like satisfaction in the alien voice. "Congratulations, humanity. You have passed the first test. But the real challenge is yet to come. In awakening your true nature, you have attracted the attention of forces that dwarf your current understanding." "What forces?" "The hierarchy, the beings who rule the spaces between galaxies. They are coming to evaluate your species, to determine whether you represent a threat that must be eliminated or a tool that can be used." Maria felt her crew's fear through their shared consciousness, but she also felt their resolve. Whatever was coming, humanity would face it as they always had. Together. "When?" she asked. "Soon. Very soon. Use the time wisely, young predators. Your species' survival depends on what you become in the days ahead." The transmission ended, leaving Maria staring at empty space where the Shadaki vessels had been. She opened a channel to all human vessels. "This is Captain Santos. Signal Earth Command immediately. Tell them to accelerate all military programs. Tell them we're about to face something that makes the collective look like children playing with toys." As the human fleet began its journey back to Earth, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that their species stood at a crossroads. The path they chose in the coming days would determine not just their survival, but their very identity. Humanity was evolving, becoming something new and dangerous. The question was, would anything recognizably human survive the transformation? Epilogue: The Gathering Storm. Earth, Fleet Command Headquarters. Admiral Rebecca Torres stood before the assembled leaders of humanity, her face grave as she delivered her report. Representatives from every human colony, every military command, every research facility had gathered to hear what she had learned. "The situation is far worse than we initially believed," she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. "The collective wasn't our real enemy. They were simply the bait in a trap that's been set for our entire species." Murmurs of concern rippled through the assembly. Torres raised her hand for silence. 3 days ago, we made contact with the beings calling themselves the Shadaki. They claim responsibility for orchestrating the entire conflict, manipulating the collective into attacking us, knowing it would trigger our species' evolutionary response. She activated a holographic display showing the organic vessels that had attacked the Esperanza. These creatures are what the Shadaki call gardeners of evolution. They travel the galaxy, forcing species into crisis situations that trigger rapid evolutionary change. Those who survive become something else. Dr. Elena Vasquez stepped forward from the crowd. "Admiral, what exactly are they preparing us for?" Tora's expression darkened. "Something called the hierarchy. According to the Shadaki, they're beings from outside our galaxy who periodically evaluate emerging species. Those judged as threats are eliminated. Those deemed useful are harvested." The silence in the chamber was deafening. "When?" asked General Harrison, Earth's military commander.